So, Marvel Netflix has had an interesting year so far. Iron Fist was a critical failure, and The Defenders, while I really enjoyed it, a lot of people found it a bit underwhelming. But now the year is being rounded out by a returning character from Daredevil getting his own show. So, now that The Punisher is finally out, let's talk about it.
The man in charge wants to meet that. Homeland. The FBI. Everybody's part of this.
Also, I'm just gonna go full spoilers with this, because that's really the only way I can talk about this properly. The short version, go watch it. It's really good. Alright, spoilers. You've been warned. So, like I just mentioned, it's a good show. It's actually a really good show. I don't really get the mixed reception this has received. Yes, it's not perfect, and it starts a bit weak, but a lot of this is just fantastic. Firstly, the casting characters here are great. I think Jon Bernthal's a great actor, and this is the best he's ever been. He is perfect as this character, some of the best casting in the MCU, period. Not only is he great in the action scenes, but he's also great in scenes of deep emotion, or just when he has to be very intimidating. Plus, he does some pretty amazing angry grunt yells. In the rest of the cast, there isn't really a weak link. Everyone is really good. I especially like Curtis, Dina, Micro, and Billy. Or I guess he's Jigsaw by the end. Ben Barnes plays the villain really well. At first, I was just like, oh, okay, so this guy's just kind of greasy and sleazy and whatever. But by the end, he was kind of terrifying in a way. Another great Marvel Netflix villain. Also, I really enjoyed the Punisher Micro dynamic here. Also, Turk Barrett shows up again, which is awesome. I think this running joke of the different defenders always beating him up to get information is great, and I just thought him showing up here was really funny. Though this was the first time I ever thought he might actually die, because if anyone's gonna kill Turk Barrett, it's the Punisher. Now, in terms of action, there's a negative and a positive here. The negative is the action scenes are just a little bit few and far between. Like, for a character like the Punisher, you'd expect there to be a little more, especially at the start. But the positive is, when it's there, the action is spectacular. After kind of average stuff in Iron Fist, Luke Cage, even Jessica Jones and The Defenders, where the action is good, just not amazing most of the time, it's great to finally go back to the action being phenomenal. This is up there with the Daredevil stuff. It's exciting, it's well shot, well edited, there's some pretty creative stuff in here, and above all, it is insanely brutal. The action's quite different from Daredevil, but I'd say it's almost just as good. How it's all set up and the choreography is fantastic. And there's something else I want to touch on. I know I say this with all the Marvel Netflix shows, don't show this to kids, because there's some dark and violent stuff in here, but this is the next level of that. I wouldn't even show this to some teenagers. This is by far the most brutal and violent entry into the MCU yet. It's kind of insane. In fact, this is one of the most brutal and violent TV shows I've ever seen. I'd say maybe just below Game of Thrones. This does not shy away from the kills at all. It shows neck snaps, stabbings, and just full-on getting shot right in the face, all front and center. This is a super adult show. Mostly the violence, but there's also some sex and language and very adult themes. Point is, just don't watch this with your kids. Or, for teens who are old enough to watch this, maybe don't watch it with your parents, because it might get weird and awkward at some points. However, all of this violence, combined with the performance, I have to say, gives us the perfect representation of the Punisher on screen. I haven't read a ton of Punisher comics, but from what I have read, and from his appearances in other stuff, this is exactly how this character should be. Not only the performance, but just everything he does and the world that surrounds him. I imagine huge Punisher fans will love this aspect of it. It definitely does this character his bloody justice, in a way only Marvel Netflix could. At one point, he suits up in the Punisher armor, and he just goes through like 20 guys with no remorse, and it's pretty spectacular. The show, like all the other Marvel Netflix shows, is also very well made, it's well shot, and pretty much all the technical aspects are great here. There are also some really tense scenes, the show on the whole is just pretty intense. And really, I found it kind of refreshing to get back to this Daredevil Season 1, Jessica Jones, way more grounded level for these Netflix shows. Like, there are no magical fists or dragon bones here, this is just straight ahead, real world, super bloody and gritty. If you didn't know this was set in the same world as the Avengers, you could 100% just watch this as its own standalone, grounded show, about this vigilante who takes care of things in the most murdery way possible. Along with being the most violent thing in the MCU yet, this is also the most real thing we've seen in this universe. Like, besides the occasional, kinda over-the-top comic book villain, or the fact that really the Punisher should be dead, like, several times over just from the damage he takes. Putting that aside, this is really realistic. Not only in terms of how grounded the action is, but also with the characters and their struggles. A big part of the show is PTSD, and how soldiers cope with war and what they've done when they come home, and that sets this apart from other stuff in the MCU and makes this just much more interesting. It's very real world, which makes you care about these characters even more. There are flashbacks to war, which are great, and that extra level just added something to this that I feel like we haven't really seen in the MCU yet. Not to this degree anyway. I also think it's weird to think about that in the same world where the Guardians of the Galaxy are fighting giant sentient planets, people are getting shot and getting their limbs blown off by bombs, and this kind of stuff is happening. The characters and their interactions and their evolutions are also really great here. Not only Frank Castle and the arc he goes through with his family and coming to terms with it and all that, but a lot of the characters in this actually have quite interesting arcs. The friendships and relationships that grow here are believable, and I enjoyed watching them. And there are even some emotional moments in here, which I did not expect. In episode 9, when Curtis was having a little bit of a monologue, that was surprisingly quite emotional. Now just a few quick things. The show has great choices in music, just in general throughout. The ending is also amazing. Like I'll get into in a second, the show gets better and better as it goes, and it all builds to a really great ending. It does get a tiny cliche, like the villain starts monologuing and says, "You and I are the same," and all that kind of stuff, but that whole scene on the carousel is still awesome. So now that I've gushed about why I liked this for so long, let's talk about the negatives here, because like all the Marvel Netflix shows, this isn't perfect. Firstly, the start of it, as in the first few episodes, are good, but start to drag a little. Like pretty much all of these shows have 2 or 3 episodes that are a little slow, and usually those are saved for around the middle or end, but this one gets them out of the way right off the bat. I'd say episodes 1 to 3 are a bit poorly paced, episodes 4 to 8 are really good, pick it up a bit, and episodes 9 to 13 just go all out and are amazing. And while I do appreciate a show that gets better and better as it goes, so you really have stuff to look forward to, those first 3 episodes or so can be a tad hard to get through. Like, they still have the great acting and the great action, but it starts to get a bit repetitive. The Frank Castle stuff is good, although he has that wife flashback one too many times, I'd say. But the just general police procedural stuff with Dina and Stein, at this point in the show, is a bit generic and not very interesting. And in general, in the first episodes, there's a lot of plodding around and moving and trying to find out stuff. There's a fine line between a slow build and a bit of a drag, and this was just a little on the wrong side a few times. Unlike Iron Fist though, which was a lot of that, this was decently interesting, like it wasn't very boring, but just there's some fat that you could have cut here. And also, as I've always complained about with these shows, with the exception of The Defenders, why is this 13 episodes? There are, let's say, 9 or even 10 really fantastic, tight, exciting episodes in here. But because they make it 13, we're left with some fantastic episodes and just some kind of stuff that could have been cut down. I just don't understand this decision. At least it gets the slow ones out of the way earlier on. Although, even after those first few episodes, the story is good, but can get a little meandering sometimes. Like it'll go from subplot to subplot, and most of it is interesting, but some stuff is less interesting than other stuff. Again, this is all pretty much fixed later on when all these stories intertwine, but earlier on, that soldier who's suffering from PTSD and kinda going crazy plot isn't as engaging. A few times also, this feels like it's sort of just following a Marvel Netflix formula. Like at one point, the cops get involved, and about halfway through, a secondary villain is introduced, and then there's a big twist involving a character's past, and, at points it kind of feels like it's going through a checklist. Also, this is a weird thing that I don't really know if it's legitimate, because maybe this happens less than I thought it did, but at some specific points, this feels a little bit low budget. And I don't mean in terms of action or effects or how it looks or any of that. That's all great. I just mean, they spend a lot of time in that micro hideout set. Like, a lot. Sure, they branch out here and there, but occasionally it starts to feel a tad claustrophobic. Or not even claustrophobic, but just like a weirdly small world, when you spend a lot of time at about 3 locations, mainly Micro's lab. Also, the storyline with Micro's wife and his kids and all that is really good, despite some less than amazing child acting, but it does end up feeling a tiny bit pointless in some ways. Like, don't get me wrong, it fleshes out Frank Castle, and especially Micro more, and it does definitely come into play in the end. But it only really ties in at the end. Before that, it never really intersects with the main story that much. So it kinda makes you wonder why they spend so much time on it. Like, spend some time on it for sure, for character development and to establish them for the final episodes. But considering it doesn't really tie into the grand scheme of things that much for most of it, I just thought they spent a tiny bit too much time on it. Again though, I did enjoy most of those scenes. The show also tries to have some political commentary kind of stuff with gun rights and that sort of thing, which makes it slightly more interesting and real-world feeling, because that topic is obviously very relevant today, but I just never felt like it did anything very deep with it. Like, the show kind of mentions it a few times, because in today's world, with a show about this kind of thing, you couldn't really not mention it, but it doesn't really go anywhere with it. It doesn't really have a solid message or try to say anything that concrete about it. Which I can understand, because you don't want to go one very direct way about a super divisive issue in a show like this that's supposed to appeal to a large audience. But just a little more than what we got would have made it feel more like it had a purpose in the show. There's also some not very subtle foreshadowing in this. Like when Curtis says something like, "Take my leg off and beat me up with it." I was like, that is definitely going to happen to someone at some point. Turns out it was him. Also, I didn't even know that Ben Barnes' character was Jigsaw, but because they kept talking about how pretty his face was, I knew that something was really gonna mess it up by the end. Now, my last point here isn't really a negative, it's just something to note. When this was first announced, I was kinda skeptical, because I didn't know if a show around the Punisher would work. Like, he's so dark and so incredibly violent. I mean, it works in the comics, but a whole season centered around him, that could get a little depressing. And really, it does start to feel a little excessive and unpleasant here. Like at the end of episode 11, when he kills all those guys, yes, that's an awesome action scene, and very comic accurate, but it's also a little unpleasant. There are characters who disagree with how he does his stuff in this, but with Frank Castle being the main character without a main moral compass like Daredevil to kind of balance it out, it can feel a bit, I guess unpleasant is the word. It's a unique and new perspective, and I like that, but when he's shooting people right in the face without a second thought, I'm thinking, am I really supposed to be rooting for this guy? But then again, that's not really a complaint, because I guess the show kinda wants you to ask those questions. So in conclusion, I thought The Punisher Season 1 was pretty fantastic. Yes, it has kind of a slow start, and yes, the story is a little meandering sometimes, and yes, this definitely could have been 8 to 10 episodes. Why, Marvel, do you do this to us? But besides that, it's a very well made look into a super interesting and super brutal corner of the MCU. And even besides that, it's just a great action drama with good characters and dialogue that really could be set in any world. I'll give it a 9.3 out of 10. So those are my thoughts on The Punisher. What did you think of this? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments. While you're at it, be sure to like this video, check out my Instagram and Twitter at BHL_Hudson, check out this podcast about movies and TV and whatnot I do every other Friday with a friend of mine. It's called The Poorly Planned Podcast, and subscribe for more videos like the one you just watched. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.